Welcome back, scientists. Today, you are going to use food chains to compare the pathway of energy from the sun through the organisms in two different environments. Let's do this, scientists. Welcome back, scientists. I am Mr. Steier, and this is Mr. Steier's classroom. Today, we are going to compare and contrast, and we are going to think like a scientist. Your goal today is that you can use food chains to compare the pathway of energy from the sun through the organisms in two different environments. If you recall from everything we've talked about so far in this life science unit, we've talked about how plants can make their own food, and they are known as producers, and we'll talk about that some more. Animals cannot make their own food, so they are consumers, and they need to eat a plant or eat something else to get energy. You know that the source of all energy is from the sun because the plants use the process of photosynthesis in order to be able to do that. And you have all that background knowledge in your head from all the lessons that we have done so far. And today, what we're going to do is we're going to look at two separate food chains, and you're going to compare and contrast them in order to be able to identify what is happening in those food chains, to be a critical thinker and to think like a scientist. All right. So the first question we're asking is, what is a food chain? Now, some of you remember that a food chain is a diagram that shows the pathway of energy as it flows from one living thing to another. So it's a pathway of energy. All right. And what do the arrows in a flow chart represent? So like this arrow right here, what does this arrow in this flow chart, what does it represent? Well, it's going to represent the direction that the energy flows. It often means that one organism has been eaten by another organism. So if we were just to quick run this through, we would see that in a pond food chain, algae is eating the sun in the process of photosynthesis in order to be able to show the flow of energy. Or these tiny water fleas, they're eating the algae, so the energy is going from the producer to the water fleas. And we'll look more at that in depth in just a second. The other thing we're talking about today is you have to know what does it mean to compare and contrast. So, what does it mean to compare and contrast? Yeah, so what we're going to do is we're going to identify how two things are the same and how they are different. So, right here, I have a compare and contrast chart. And what I'm comparing and what I'm contrasting is a cat and a cow. And then in my middle column, I'm going to have what they both have in common. So I just want you to think quickly, what are things that you know about a cat? What are things that you know about a cow? And what are things that you know about both a cat and a cow? Now, I understand that we could fill up this whole chart on what things that cats have. And if it goes in the cat column, it means that only a cat has it. So a cat can meow, a cow can moo. They both have 4 legs. So in the both column, I could write they're both mammals. They both have hair. All right, in the cat column, I might write that a cat is much smaller, especially when you're talking about a house cat. A cat is smaller and a cow is larger. So I can fill up what things would be in my cat column, what would be in my cow column, and what both of them have that are the same. They're different sizes. They have different sounds. They have the same number of legs. They have the same number of ears. They have the same number of tails. You'll notice that sometimes a cow would have horns, but a cat would not have horns. So we are going to use a compare and contrast chart like this in order to compare and contrast those two food chains. So we're going to have a pond food chain and a rainforest food chain. And when we look here, these diagrams show the food chains in two different environments. One food chain is a pond and the other is the rainforest. In any food chain, the energy contained in the food chain was once energy from the sun. Plants capture the sun's energy in a chemical process that form plant matter. Tiny floating algae are not plants, but like plants, they are producers. They use energy from the sun to produce their own food. So you're going to compare the food chains shown here, and you're going to answer the question, how are they alike and how are they different? So again, let's just start with our food chain for the pond. So the first energy source is sunlight. Sunlight is the source of energy for the food chain. The sunlight gives its energy to the algae. Algae use sunlight to grow and reproduce. The algae gives its energy to the tiny animals such as water fleas that eat the algae. The water fleas then share their energy is consumed by the bluegill sunfish. So small fish eat smaller animals such as water fleas. So the bluegill sunfish gets its energy from eating the water fleas, which got their energy from eating the algae, which got its energy from the sunlight. So I can trace this path of energy using those arrows in my flowchart, and I can know how energy gets to the bluegill sunfish in a pond food chain. All right, let's look at a rainforest food chain now. So again, sunlight is the source of energy for the food chain. So the energy starts from the sun. Then that sunlight is passed to a producer. So the red cocoa fruit. Rainforest trees use sunlight to make food. They use the energy in this food to produce fruit and seeds. Then the spider monkey comes along, and the spider monkey eats those fruit and seeds from the red cocoa fruit. Yes, you're right. Something is coming along to eat that spider monkey. And the spider monkey is consumed by another consumer, the jaguar. Jaguars eat animals such as monkeys. So the jaguar got its energy from the sun, but it got its energy from the spider monkey, which got the energy from the red cocoa fruit, which got its energy from the sun. So again, I can use those arrows and that flow chart, and I can trace the path of energy in a rainforest food chain from the sun to the jaguar. All right, so let's quick talk about some of the things that we just were reminded in this food chain process. What is a producer? Thank you for whispering. Yes, a producer is an organism that captures the energy from the sun to make its own food. And what is a consumer? A consumer is an organism that gets its food by eating other organisms. So the jaguar is a consumer. It's actually a secondary consumer because it eats the spider monkey. All right, so what you are doing today is you are finding that original source of energy for both the rainforest and the pond. What is the original source of energy for the rainforest and the pond? It's the same. Okay, and you are going to be able to look through, again, this food chain we have right here. So sunlight, plant, consumer, consumer. In the pond, sunlight, algae, which is the producer, consumer, consumer. You are thinking about the process of the transfer of energy. You are focused on how animals get energy from the sun. You are focused on how the sun is the source of energy for all living things on this planet, and how that energy is used by the next thing in line in the food chain. Now, I know that you're going to start talking about how all of these food chains can connect, because there could be a pond inside of a rainforest, and when we start connecting food chains, those are called food webs, but we're not quite there yet. Think back to what we talked about in our last lesson. Think about how these arrows help you understand the relationships between the organisms in the food chain. How does the energy flow? And you need to be prepared to compare and contrast. So how are they different and how are they the same? These two food chains for the pond and for the rainforest. So again, your goal today is you came here so you could say, you can use food chains to compare the pathway of energy from the sun through the organisms in two different environments. As you go through today's activity, you will be putting the animals in each of these food chains in order. If you need to come back and watch this video again so you can watch the cycle from the pond where it goes the sun, green algae, water fleas to the sunfish, and then in the rainforest, the sun, the cocoa, spider monkey, jaguar. If you need to come back and watch that, or write that down, pay attention. You're going to need that information for your activity to put all of those in order so you can prove you understand how energy flows through a food chain. And you're going to be comparing and contrasting. You're going to be a critical scientific thinker because you can think like a scientist. Thanks for being with me here today. I am Mr. Steier, and this is Mr. Steier's Classroom. I will see you next time, scientists. Bye!